it's all fun and all that. So we are at noon. Should we go ahead and? Well, I don't know. Ask some of my clients. I mean, all right, all right. Hello, everybody. I'm Zach Cardwell. Since it's going to be just us here and everything, I'll probably be sitting at the table and all that. And feel free to jump in at any time. One of the great things about having a smaller group is that we can ask questions as we go along. So don't. Oh, oh yeah, sure. So basically, what I'm going to talk about is roles in data. One of the things when I talk to tech folks around the city and everything is I talk a whole lot about how, you know, Ivy Tech has this great untapped potential uh, in terms of the students coming out of its programs. Uh, I really, really push that a lot of the things that you're learning right now in the database management stuff, I'm assuming that you're in those classes. If you're not, that's fine. But what you learn in classes like that are directly applicable to the tech sphere as it is, and these are awesome careers that you can have as well, applying your degree and you know basically finding a niche that makes the most sense. Data as a field is becoming huge. Data engineering, data analytics, data science. Every company wants someone to figure out their data, and that's a major thing to kind of put on your radar and start seeing if any of these roles kind of fit. So before we get started, I put this in a later slide too. This is, but I want to say up front as well and re-emphasize it a little bit later. This is based off of my experience. And that's kind of a narrower experience. So in general, I think the rules kind of follow across industries. But if you look at different cities or if you talk at different sizes of companies, they might have varying definitions. So that's just something to kind of be aware of. But in general, these are the observations that I've seen with industry. So let's talk about me just for a little bit, just so that you guys kind of have an idea of my background. So I'm the principal data scientist and business owner of Data317. It's a company I run. I do a lot of consulting and help companies basically figure out what to do with their data, how to organize their data, and also make algorithms to help them do solve business problems. I'm also the vice president of data science for Vertex Intelligence, which is a partnership of data scientists within the city. Our clients do just about everything from healthcare to tax fraud to marketing optimization, and there's even potentially something with the Department of Defense that we'll be working on in a little bit. I'm a Purdue physics grad. I graduated in 2010, but I did take my gen ed classes in 2006 at Ivy Tech. So I actually am pretty familiar with the system. When I was at Purdue too, I was a volunteer tutor, and I worked extensively with Ivy Tech, working with a bunch of students up in the Lafayette campus. So I'm somewhat familiar with the Ivy Tech system. I'm not going to claim that I'm an expert in it at all, but that's a little bit on my background. And I kind of said this before, but I've worked in a bunch of industries. You name it, I've probably touched it at some point. Logistics, tax fraud, marketing, healthcare, education now. I have a contract right now with the Noblesville campus of Ivy Tech to design a summer program for data science. And yeah, it's incredible, like the amount of diversity that comes from the data industry in general. So enough about me. Well, a little bit more about me. So day to day, this is what prompted this slide is people often ask, so what does a day in your life actually look like as a person in data? And I make a lot of presentations for schools, sales calls, and businesses. So that's frankly, I have to do the advertising of my own business and everything. So, last week I talked to Rose Holman. The week before that, I talked to Purdue. I'm going to be doing a whole bunch more talks in the future with some groups like Revenue Collective and other areas. You end up talking a lot when you're a data scientist. I write a lot of reports on data quality analysis, segmentation, and et cetera. So basically, you think about those science lab reports that you all did back in high school and all that. That's like my life for a lot of stuff if I'm not delivering technology directly. I do a lot of mathematical research, and that is the central part of my job. Basically, how do I write new algorithms and how do I solve new problems? It is the amount of math that you need in data science is enormous, and it's not really too much about depth. It's more about breadth and knowing where to look for problems and look for solutions and different approaches to hit it. I do a whole bunch of coding. I code mostly inside of Python. I also do a little bit of SQL and R. And you can't get around the software development side. And then a bunch of boring stuff like accounting and all that, and sending out cold calls and everything. It's a necessary part of being in business. You have to do it. It's not something that I love doing, but you have to do it. So here's some things about the data industry. And, as I said earlier, data is really big and popular right now, huge. You look at almost any company that's out there kind of floating around, they're hiring someone in data or a data related field, especially in technology, but also outside of technology. There are several fulfilling careers in data. It is not just being a data scientist, and the data scientist is not in any means at like the peak of the data industry or anything. Data science is just a different vertical inside this industry. So I'm going to give a lot of data science perspective, but yeah, don't feel like a data scientist sits at the top of the organization or anything, because that's absolutely not the case. Much of what you need to learn is stuff that you can learn on your own, and this is the great democratizing factor of it. I've seen the course listing that Ivy Tech offers around database management and all that. Those are all the key skills that you need in order to find a job. And anything that you need of excess of that, you can get at like Code Academy or other places. And another last thing, and I'll repeat this in a slide later, titles change a lot. So back in the day, what you might consider an ETL developer is now called a data engineer. Database management might be DevOps. It's something to kind of be aware of. Don't get too fixated on the individual titles that you might go out and approach. It changes all the time. There's even a title out there called Data Wrangler, which is like ETL and that sort of stuff. So just always, whenever you're looking at job profiles or anything, look at the constituent skills that you need in order to be successful with it. There isn't like a career path that you'll see in the data industry right now that you see in other older industries like marketing, where you have coordinators, specialists, and managers and directors and MVPs and all that. That doesn't exist in the data world at all. So let's talk about the highlights. So these are the big roles that I see inside of the data industry. Like I said, titles change a little bit, but these are the big ones. So we have data architect, data engineer, data scientist, data analyst, and just so that we're not repeating data a whole bunch, I also add a machine learning engineer. And I think it's, especially between the two engineers, there are key differences between those two fields to kind of be aware of when you're going out there and venturing into it. So we're going to go through each one of these one by one, and I'll kind of highlight some of my experience with working with these personas. So data architect. So the data architect is responsible for telling the story of the data, basically understanding what's the sourcing, and what does this table mean, what does this value mean. There's a lot of logic that goes into that to actually make it so that it's usable. A good example of a person who does this is my friend, Dr. Tom Considine, who I worked with at KSMC. So we were hired by the state of Indiana to go in and look at the Department of Corrections, so prison facilities, or tax fraud. And Tom's job was to look at all the disparate data resources that the state had and build a common theory of how all these things work together. That's what a data architect does. It makes it so that a data scientist can actually do their job. and it kind of sets a platform so that a data engineer can do their job. So that's what a data architect does. This is going to be a burgeoning field probably in the coming years, just because there's been such a focus on collecting all this data, and folks are learning that they need to do something to organize with it, to actually truly organize it. The key backgrounds with this is SQL, database design, and general programming experience. So things like Python, Ruby on Rails, working with, in general, object relation mappers, ORMs, and basically having a sense about different types of data, how it's collected, different business processes around that, and the comment, building a story around what's actually contained within the data itself. All right. And this picture right here, this is ERD. So basically, each of these represent different values in tables that get combined in a unique way. A data architect is someone who would build out this diagram so that you actually understand what's going on with the data itself. So a data engineer. So a data engineer is the person who takes the great ideas and the findings of architects and other possibly like product-focused people and actually implements it and comes up with the technology and develops the technology to actually execute on the ideas. And they maintain the database systems. A lot of the programs that exist here at Ivy Tech are actually geared towards a data engineering position. And it is an incredible field where you have to really figure out, okay, that's great that we know that this is what the data is, but how do we actually use it? How do we get it in a state where we actually do it? So in order to do this, you need a lot of programming experience or programming knowledge. So just getting out there, learning about Python, learning about Ruby on Rails, some SQL and some ETL tools. Different shops rely on SQL at different levels. If you were to talk to my friend Tom that I mentioned before, he would be all SQL all the time. And there's good merits to that, but there's also a lot of technology and a lot of frameworks out there that's made it a lot easier to do the SQL side, and you would focus more on like Python or Ruby on Rails. Data engineers make it so that you actually get a pipeline of data so you can actually build technology. A lot of data science, a lot of consulting stuff comes down to doing reporting. That's not very actionable for a lot of tech companies. A lot of tech companies need a product, and data engineers are the ones that build the pipeline to make that happen. Now, and on here, we have a Jupyter notebook. That's probably something that if you're working with Python, you're going to see quite a lot. And the Anaconda is a fantastic environment. So if you want to jump in there and learn some of the tooling around it, just to start playing around with Python and getting to know the technical resources underneath it. Yeah. ETL is extract, transform, and load. I'm sorry, I didn't define that. So the idea is that you take a bunch of data, you transform it, and then you get it into your database. And the architect kind of designs that process. The data engineer will implement that process. All right. So then the next one is a data scientist. And so this is what I do. This is my definition of a data scientist. Oops, now my phone is going crazy. Sorry about this. Never stops. All right. So this is my what I do from a day-to-day basis. I look at data and I find patterns in that data to build technology, to build products, or find research findings. It basically, I use a lot of statistics, I use a lot of math, I do a lot of programming, and I build algorithms that do this. So if a good analog is, if you think about Google Photos, it takes in your photos, right? And then you can search dog, and you can find all the pictures of dogs inside of your photos. The algorithm that powers that is the kind of stuff that I build. And we do it in different ways and different approaches and all that, but we build the logic around products so that we can actually deliver results. The key background with this one is mathematics, programming, and SQL again. there's a lot of folks that want to bypass the mathematics because there's a ton of frameworks out there that exist to do like deep learning and AI and all that. But math is really where the key findings come from. And what we have here are a few examples from my personal work. So this right here is an algorithm that looked at millions of articles and built connections out of them around the 2016 election. We did that. I did that at a fantastic company called Demand Jump, which is based down on the Circle. And the results that come from it are stunning because we were able to detect patterns before they were mentioned in the news. So this over here is the Russia investigation, and we detected this back in 2016, initial announcements of that. And we could also filter out like fake news and all that good stuff too. Whenever we base that off of finding authorial intent. This right here is from when I worked with KSMC and we were looking at tax fraud. We developed an algorithm where we could separate folks who were committing fraud and folks that weren't. The red dots there represent the fraudsters. The blue dots represent the folks that weren't. And when we initially plotted this, it was just black and white, and we just saw these two blobs, right? When we put on the flag, that's where the color comes from, and you see that we caught almost all of them. Inside of that group, we found, I believe it was about $20 million of fraud. Before looking at this algorithm and everything, it would take anywhere from 6 to 8 months for an entire floor of DOR to find that fraud. Did it in about 5 minutes there. And then down here is site selection algorithms. What this is I was working with a hospital at the time, and they wanted to know where they should be putting acute care facilities for rehab. And basically, we brought in a bunch of census information, and we started clustering. And the colors indicate the cluster that they belong to. And a lot of it, you can kind of see the pattern that kind of emerges from it naturally. It has to do with some hospitals. That's why Cincinnati over here isn't quite the same shape and color as Indianapolis, but that segmentation, basically we used it in order to find neighborhoods where we could put hospitals at. So this is what I spend a lot of my time working on. Some current projects that I'm working on right now are things like helping schools figure out how to schedule classes so that it's the most efficient and students can take all the classes that they need to without ever having those classes blocking. Another thing that I'm working on right now is figuring out how to predict orders of commodities for like parts manufacturers. And again, all it comes down to is a lot of math, tons of programming, and some intuition that you kind of build up over time. The next thing is a data analyst, and this is a huge field that is taking off right now. A lot of people think that data scientists and data analysts are similar, are the same role, and in some companies you'll see them treated that way. So kind of be aware of that. Some folks consider data science and data analysis very different, or very much the same, while others consider it very different. Data analysts help answer business questions from the data directly. So the idea is that someone will present you with a business question and they'll say, well, what is my click-through rate on a certain ad? Or what is the conversion rate of X program? And what the data analyst's job is to go into the data, find that stuff, and create reporting based off of it. This will include visualizations. This will include spreadsheets. This will include using a little bit of SQL to get the database itself, but also ingesting things like from Microsoft Excel and other sources of data. The key background for that is some SQL. Tableau is an industry standard. Salesforce actually owns Tableau right now. It's a great software that generates these visualizations that we see right here. And some programming experience and some statistical background. So in my view at least, and others have different opinions, data analysts don't really focus on making the algorithms as much. They report and they do very important things like answering the business question as it develops. The data analyst position actually has grown out of like the various different analysts that kind of existed in the industry before. So like marketing analysts, pricing analysts, uh, a BI analyst that existed out there. It's a business intelligence analyst. It's kind of a different background than data science in general, but more and more companies are realizing that what they need more than a data scientist is often a data analyst, someone who can inform their product, someone who can inform the dashboards. This is a huge field that is just only going to get larger. And I highly, highly recommend looking into Tableau if this sounds like something that you want to do, and learning how to manipulate Tableau and doing various data visualization challenges. The last job that we're going to talk about is a machine learning engineer. And the reason why I pulled this one out was this gets advertised a lot in the job boards, a machine learning engineer. And it's like, what does that actually mean? And what does that actually mean for a job role? And what the machine learning engineer is fundamentally responsible for is taking all the funky ideas that you might get from data science, all the crazy algorithms that might not be optimized or might not be production ready, and make them so that they are production ready. So data scientists will do a lot of prototyping. The machine learning engineer is the one who actually figures out how to make it work. Necessarily, this includes heavy programming experience, so lots of Python, maybe some C, maybe some Go, some various different programming languages, some SQL. It's not so much about extracting data as before. There might be a component of that depending on the problem that you're trying to solve, and some mathematics. Machine learning engineers aren't really concerned about making the model from scratch. They're more concerned about implementing the model. And the pictures that we see right here, this is actually a neural network. So when you hear deep learning or anything from industry or anything like that, this is a diagram of how that actually works. There's a lot of interesting math that works with it. And down here, I actually stole both of these from Wikipedia, but this one right here is from the machine learning topic picture. And what it shows is actually the transformations that take place inside of data science in order to make a decision boundary, which is what this red line is. And a lot of it is transforming data in such a way so that you can draw a straight line. Almost all of neural networks and everything come down to stretching and squishing regular old XY plots that we have so that you can draw a straight line across them and make a decision. So some things to remember, this can all change. These data roles shift quite a bit. A while before, we used to call them, ETL developers and, statisticians and pricing analysts or BI analysts. Now we're calling them data X. It can change again. Just be aware of it. Always compare your experience. This is based on my experience at the indie tech scene. That's a huge thing to remember. So this might not necessarily translate to Chicago or a smaller town here in Indianapolis or in Indiana. So just be aware of it. And remember, always look at the job titles. And the last point is really important because I have a friend that recently went through like looking for a job after being laid off and getting really concerned about hitting the checklist of finding jobs. Most of the job postings that you see are suggestions, and what folks are really looking for are problem solvers. And if you can demonstrate that you can solve problems, more than likely, if you don't hit a few of the requirements, unless you're going through one of the ridiculous job posting sites that check whether or not you hit those requirements, you have a better than average chance of actually getting a job in one of these roles. So some practical advice about getting started. Again, don't get intimidated about job postings. These titles change. The most important thing is, do you think your experience aligns with the job posting that you're going after? It can take a few tries to get into industry. You'll have a lead and you'll get into the interview process and then nothing will happen. You're just going to have to try again. It more than likely is not because of you at all. It's just because some business thing happened. This happens a lot in tech. I wouldn't ever put too much stock in what an interviewer might have to say or a decision that comes down. Employers always value practical experience. This is a big one. A lot of resumes, particularly when I go to job fairs like at Purdue or something, I get a resume stack this thick. I don't have a lot of time to actually go through all those resumes. And so what I look for when I go through it is, okay, who is going to solve the business need that I need to solve to bring it in? Now, if I have a listing of, just the same experience over and over again, this is something that happens at Purdue a lot. I'll have 150 like identical resumes with class projects on them. It's just the names change at the top. Uh, More than likely, I'm going to shift them aside because I don't see the practical experience there. Um, it's really important to get that practical experience. If you can't get the job title right away, is to by interning and volunteering. So interning in a tech company, particularly here in the Indianapolis area, more than likely you'll get exposed right away to everything that you need in order to be successful in the business. Most companies in this area see internship as a way to try out employment. And so if you jump into an internship with one of these companies, you're basically almost going to secure yourself a job in the future. Another way to do this is to volunteer for an organization that you care about. Uh, Many organizations, frankly, can't afford to have a consultant come in and do all the analysis and everything that goes into proving their worth as a organization for the community, but also their effectiveness of advertising their different sponsorships. Uh, they would be more than happy to get someone who's been trained in Tableau or trained in data engineering to come in, look at their data, create visualizations like this, and tell a story to their sponsors and their funding sources in order to secure that funding in the future. So volunteering is a huge, huge way to put a bullet point on your resume that really stands out compared to most of the people that are applying to a job. And another important thing to remember is that this is not, none of this is like requires special knowledge or anything like that. You don't have to be a super genius to jump into these roles, and you don't have to be something, I don't know, better than a common person. These are all people who go into these roles. They are all just like you and me. You can do this. You just have to find the resources, the educational resources, fill in some of the programming experience, fill in some of the SQL, look into some of these roles, and you can get into this field. Uh, I do admit that data sometimes is a little bit elitist. And the thing is that once you get on the other side of the job posting board, you realize that no one really knows what they're doing most of the time. And yeah, don't ever be intimidated by going out there and trying to find it, because once you make that break, you'll be ready to rock and roll. So that's enough talking on my side. We talked about data roles and everything, but do we have any questions? Do you want to talk about data? Do you want to hear more about roles? Do you want to hear about how the business of data science actually works? I'm all open. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. So, so we would make the program that detects the cars as a data scientist, at least in my definition of a data scientist. Exactly. So that product is where I fit in. So when I was doing this, particularly the upper two right there, I made the algorithm that actually did that. This one down here is using another person's program called a self-organizing map. Any any other questions? I'm all ears. Yes. So there is a fantastic organization here in town called TechPoint, and TechPoint lists a lot of internships along that line that you can generally peruse. Uh, that is very tech focused, and you'll probably hear the name High Alpha a lot. You'll probably hear some of the portfolio companies of High Alpha. Those are all great places to reach out. Another thing is that internships frequently are not set in stone, which is it's kind of peculiar for the industry itself. So if you reach out to a VP of technology or a software engineering manager and just get coffee with them and then see if there's any internship opportunities, they might not have anything posted, but because you said something about it and you asked them, and if they think that they would like working with you, they could offer you an internship just from that. This remember these are all people, and it can shift just by having a good conversation with someone or showing some enthusiasm for the work that you're doing. Yeah. And any other questions? I'm not right now. Yeah. Yeah. So right now, Vertex, this partnership that I was discussing, we're a small enough shop that when you bring on an internship, you want to make sure that the intern is getting something out of it. You should never ever take an internship where you're just getting coffee because you're not going to learn by osmosis. You have to learn by doing, and that means having the support network there. And Vertex isn't in a position right now where it can support an intern. Yeah. So the principal partners of Vertex is just a few people. It's a very small team that's highly dedicated to building like core technologies. And the thing is that our project load is such right now that it's just an allocation of time thing. Yeah. Yes. Hmm. 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 So, uh-huh. So I can't talk about Florida from personal experience, but the thing is that having that experience on your resume is probably going to stand out quite a bit. Um, One of the secrets about most of the tech sphere, at least around here in Indianapolis, is that almost any tech company that you were to pick up are hiring now boot camps. So what's a boot camp? It's a 6-week course. It's something like that, where they basically teach you a bunch of frameworks to go through. The education you're getting here at Ivy Tech with an associate's degree is far more deeper and far more applicable, in my opinion, than what you typically get in a boot camp. I have a feeling that if you were to look at some of those companies that you're looking at in Florida, if it's a tech company, I don't know about anywhere else, any other industry, that they're also hiring those boot camp people. And so when you talk to them, if you can talk to them or get coffee with them or start messaging them on LinkedIn, I would bring up, here is my experience, here's the full breadth of it. And by the way, I also have done this in practice, so I know something about how the world really works compared to how it's taught in school. Yeah. Any, it feels like you have enough. Yeah, sure. So it doesn't hurt because what you're demonstrating there is more and more experience. So if you can find something that you have the time for, and that's always going to be the thing that you're judging against, doing some volunteering work allows you to kind of punch above your weight because you'll be able to talk to like big ranging initiatives that you helped with. and it gets you outside of the context of your job. One of the things when people first start in this field is that their experience is monolithic. So they know about, in your case, you know how DOR works, and you know a lot of you know about how the state works and everything. That can sometimes make employers, well, they look at the experience, but having a diversity of experience is always a nice add-on. So doing volunteer work still is probably going to be valuable. Yeah, yeah. So again, it gets to the thing. Always remembering that these organizations are composed of people like you and me. And so when I wanted to volunteer for Gleaners, I just sent an email to the CFO of Gleaners, and they happened to email me back. Now, look, you're not going to get a response every time. I sure don't. And but that is a very effective way. Just remember that these folks are people, and just reaching out to them, you can usually find something to volunteer for, some way that you can help them, and kind of approach it from that standpoint. And I have to say, like that approach is unusually effective. Just reaching out to folks and seeing how you can help. It's a good way to get jobs. It's a good way to get internships, and it's a great way to find volunteer positions. So if I were to reach out, and there is a personal relationship aspect of this too, what I would say is, hey there, I'm really interested in your cause. Would you mind getting coffee at some point? Sending a resume initially might be a little bit too forward. What you would then do is set up a coffee meet or wherever is appropriate for them, maybe even just going to their office or getting on a call, and bring up your experience and how much you care. And that's the most important, being authentic to their cause. You can't just go in and say, well, I need to signal or anything. Find something that you care about as well. Talk about that, and then kind of bring up your experience. They might ask for a resume. A lot of times they don't. It depends on the various factors in the organization that you're working on. But having the personal game of, just reaching out to people and, being authentically interested in what they're trying to accomplish is just as effective. Sometimes just sending a resume out, what immediately goes to the mind is that people are fishing for jobs. And maybe that's the case, maybe that's what you're doing, but it can be a little bit too forward sometimes. Uh-huh. Okay. Hmm. Hmm. No, no, you're fine. I don't. I mean, a lot of these interactions, and trust me, I've been on the other side. I know the intimidation that kind of go like what it's like to kind of approach these things. Um, that what I think about in your experience right there is, you already have someone that's already said that they said that they would help you in a sense. They've given you some pointers about where to go and all that. That person is an advocate for you already, and they can possibly make introductions for you. Now, the thing about it is that you want to be careful. You want to treat that person as a person and not as a stepping stone. So just use interpersonal skills, that we've all learned throughout our life. Treating people as human, being kind, uh, and most importantly, saying thank you. Being appreciative, being expressing gratitude to these folks for helping you get ahead. Uh, one thing that I've learned, particularly as I've been out on my own with my business, is that people in general want to help you. It is incredible. People will do the most extraordinary things to help you get ahead because more than likely they've been in a similar situation and they're paying it back. So just look for those advocates, and most importantly, be respectful. Treat them as a human, not as a stepping stone or a pawn to be used, and then you'll be golden. So what I would do in your case, I don't know how the conversation has went or anything. Just reach out and say, is there any way that you could introduce me to some people who could give me more information about that? And then just follow that chain. More than likely, you'll find a position that way pretty easily. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Hmm. 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 So that's really specific. A lot of it is just continuing the conversation. Yeah, you just talk, see what's there, and also, don't get too focused on one organization. That's where a lot of career goals kind of get hit hard. Um, you have experience as a data analyst. There are others out there that there are other positions out there that you can have. And just getting into the tech circle more than likely will help you out a whole bunch. But yeah, that's really specific, and I don't personally know this person, so I can't tell you like what you should say because everyone's a different person. Everyone has different personality types, different interaction types, and all that. So it's just in general, just be respectful, show gratitude, and treat people as people and not as problems, and you'll be fine. Yeah. Any other? Yeah. Yeah, so one thing, so I'll start with data science, and this is going to inform the question about data analytics. So, data science in general, when you look at the industry, particularly here in town and also some of the surrounding areas, data science is turning into more of a consulting, contracting sort of relationship. The thing is that most companies, it doesn't matter how innovative they are or how product focused they are, what have you, unless you're not a mega company like Eli Lilly or Salesforce, you probably only have one or two data science problems that can probably be solved within 6 to 12 months. You don't need someone full-time staff in data science like that. What's been happening is what they do discover is that they do need the reporting, the analytics, the job role that I discuss with this more often than they need a data scientist. They need a full-time data analyst. The reason why, even in a product-focused company, so a tech company that's actually selling like a product of some sort, is that this data analyst will inform what they have the data for and what they can actually do and what they can show the customer. This is becoming more and more of a central role, and I see this just burgeoning, over the next few years, because what folks are realizing is that data science is not having the ROI um, that they were expecting, just because there aren't enough data science problems in any given company in general. So I see this picking up quite a bit. That's that's exactly it. Yep, that's exactly it. And that's why this consulting contracting thing is happening right now because it's done. Uh, why do I have this person on staff that I'm paying their salary for and all that? while a data analyst role does continue because there's always something that a data analyst can provide to a company. So a lot of them, yes. Tableau is a good example of that. There is a Tableau server that exists out there. Um, there is a potential that there is going to be a requirement for data analysts to be doing more and more complex things with data. So more SQL, more Python-based things. Um, that it isn't quite there yet. The industry is still evolving, but for sure. I see data analysts forming more in central of a role than ever, though, in every aspect of a business. From, this is what our data is doing to this is the performance metrics from marketing to this is how our cloud infrastructure is performing to all of that. Yeah. So a lot of the AWS, in my experience at least, now it might be different for other folks. In my experience at least, will be handled for the data analysts already. But being familiar with it never hurts, especially when you hit hard constraints on what you can actually do. So being familiar with that, having a general knowledge about how AWS works, is a great thing. The big things that data analysts I could see needing down the line is more programming experience. So more Python, more R, more SQL experience. Right now, you can do a lot with Tableau and some basic understanding of how some of these things work. But I could see there being a heavier coding component of being a data analyst in the future. Some places already are. I believe like IU, and this is anecdotal and from one person, but like IU Health, I think their data analysts are quite technical already. Yeah. So it is kind of how the industry is going. I don't. Hmm. In general, it yeah, and that's one of those things that will be kind of subject to the business that you're working at. So there's a lot of places that like IBM's reporting services. So I think it's SRSS or SPSS. There's other providers of like dashboarding and all that, like Domo. The most important thing is just understanding like some of the underlying like data qualities, and then you can use any tool. Um, so a lot of what you would do as a data analyst, you can master like the thinking and everything from looking at things like spreadsheets in Microsoft Excel or what have you. And this Tableau just makes it way easier and way prettier than what you can get outside uh, of Excel in general. Any other questions? All yours. We had a few. We talked a lot about being a data analyst there. Mhm. Oh yeah, yeah, it's fun stuff. It's absolutely fun stuff. Data science is one of those roles. Like I didn't want to take the title as vice president because I love being a data scientist. I have to do the VP for businessy reasons and selling stuff and all that. But I would have been happy retiring as a data scientist. I love the field. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. 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 So, so that is a role that isn't actually mentioned up here. I focus a lot on the technical stuff, but what you're talking about is kind of almost a product manager or something along those lines. That is a completely different talk. Uh, yeah, but product is a really compelling field too, and there is a fantastic organization here in town that is dedicated to making awesome products called Innovate Map. And if you can ever get someone to come in and talk about product, I would recommend talking to someone from there. Yeah. Yeah. So it's you see them growing in various different ways. So that fundamentally, my company is a consulting service. Um, uh, DB services, I don't know them. KSMC, so KSM Consulting, they're based off of the Circle. They have a pretty impressive data science group that's growing out of there. You see it in several consulting companies. A lot of times, what folks are realizing is that it kind of fits into like management consulting, and they kind of spin off this other division that's dedicated to data science. I wouldn't be surprised if you see more product-focused companies, not necessarily the one I mentioned before, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see a data practice building up inside of them as well as part of their consulting packages. Just because it's people are seeing data science as central to like delivering product needs as well. So it's in the process. It's very much a mix right now. What companies are realizing too, it's really hard to source data scientists, and consulting just seems the way to go. It makes the most financial sense for most people involved as well. So it's very wishy-washy right now about the state of the industry, but I see it kind of evolving that way down the line. Yeah. Any other questions in general? Happy to talk about anything. Yeah. Yes, please do. So resumes, in general, what I like to say is keep it to one page. That's that's very important. Um, it comes down to the same advice that I was given before. Remember, especially if you're handing in a paper resume with a smaller company, there's someone physically going through these things. So what are the highlights that you have to specify on your resume that represent you best to that company? That's huge. Have practical experience listed. That's very big. And there is this one advice that I've heard a lot to think about language like descriptive language, how you would describe yourself. Uh, One person once said, look at how people write horoscopes and take how they write horoscopes, the language that they use that generally applies and is very positive and everything. Use similar sorts of language in your resume, and people will respond to it very strongly. I don't know if that actually works or not, but it's an anecdote that I've heard in the past. With how horoscopes in general work, that would kind of make sense. But in general, just keep it short, keep it highlight the things that are most important that you feel that you've exemplified over the last few years, and also be aware that the resume itself. I mean, in the last like 4 or 5 positions I've had, um, I've never submitted a resume. It varies. Once you make the jump, eventually you won't even be passing it around anymore. So that's something to be aware of as well. Yeah. Hmm. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So this is an unfortunate problem in the space right now. HR folks are trying their best, and they're really putting an honest effort to find the best people that would fit with the company in terms of culture and business processes and all that. But yeah, they don't have the technical experience a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times to actually evaluate your resume. Um, when you talk to those people, what they're really trying to figure out is what it is like to work with you and when they're doing a pre-screening and all that. But if you want to get around like the technical aspect, like you feel like a good example is, let's say that you have PyCharm listed on your resume, which is a developer environment for Python, but they want Jupyter notebooks. Well, as a technical person, you know that you're doing fundamentally the same thing in both of those technologies, and a HR person might not be aware of that. How you bypass that is by having a being able to talk to folks outside of like the hiring stream in general. So what I recommend is going to meetups and talking to employees of that company directly, and kind of bypassing some of that just because what you're talking about is the worst parts of credentialism that kind of exist out there. And I used to deal with that all the time. It sucked. Yeah. 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 Well, as long as you can demonstrate that you can still do the job, and it will come out in technical interviews as well. The differences between the two, like I know with React, you have a state that you're concerned about and how it operates through, and Angular is just a little bit different with how it handles it. Yeah, yeah. So it's the HR thing is a problem. I do recommend that if you guys have time, I know that many students, particularly at Ivy Tech, have jobs outside of school and everything. It's going to meetups. There is a React Indie that I would highly recommend going to, and it's on meetups. So if you go to meetups, talking to people who are in the field. The great thing about talking to people who are in the field is more than likely the companies that are hiring and those they're giving people their employees bonuses if they source applicants. So if you get to know the people who work at a company, if you get to know the general community itself, they'll help you get a job, and they'll also get a bonus for helping you get a job. You have to be good at what you do, and you have to prove what you're doing, and you have to actually know everything that goes into it. There's no bypassing that, but you do kind of get around some of the application process that way. So Meetups is like so Meetups is a website. What it is a bunch of groups that get together to talk about things like React. They get together to talk about like Python or Ruby or data science even. Uh, it's a great way to find a bunch of professionals who do what you want to do, learn the industry lingo, learn the industry problems, and also potentially source a job for yourself. Highly, highly, highly recommend doing that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or just the Meetups app. It's on in the App Store. Hmm. Yeah, and TechPoint lists these out as well. Yeah, fi- it might be. I don't know. Yeah, but yeah, that I you you can't deny the social you you can't deny the social game and like finding a job. I mean, it's not as simple as just putting in applications most times. Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, in general, a lot of the technical stuff, most companies feel that As long as you can problem solve, we can teach you that. There's different paradigms that exist out in programming. That all languages, they might change the syntax a little bit. In general, the same logic applies to them. And knowing one and showing that you know one and you know how to think about problems in a certain way will demonstrate that you can probably pick up a language pretty quick. Hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. No, in general it doesn't because the expectation is learning your first computer language is always the hardest. But after that, it gets easier, easier, easier. I lean towards Python. I think I love Python as a language. If you're not learning a programming language right now, that's I think is a pretty good place to start. But after that, you'll find that you can just pick up all these other languages relatively quickly, just because the paradigms are so similar between languages. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, yeah, yeah. So what I used in the past was Code Academy when I was learning to learning Python. You can't substitute a good project too, so that's something to be very aware of. You can learn all the features of a language, like these are the keywords, these are the things, and all that. Yeah, putting it into play is probably going to be the most valuable thing. So if you can think of a problem you want to solve, uh, that's the best way to go about it. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. No, yeah, these resources are out there and it's great. Uh, you can't. It's just one of those things where we've never been at a time before where you can find this so easily on your own now and learn all this on your own. But just finding those resources and picking up that first language, the next language, if you need to learn a new language, will be so much easier because you'll know how programming works in general. Yeah, except for SQL. SQL is a little bit different, so take a course on SQL as well. But yeah, yeah, yeah. SQL's fun. What's fun about SQL is it's all math underneath the hood. Um, all the logic that you have to do, select this from that, where this condition is true. It's all math. Yeah. So so I would say the most math heavy one is going to be data science. And the reason for that is it isn't so much that you have to be an expert in any field of math in general, you have to be aware of it. So there are things like a lot of folks that go into data science have full on math degrees, or math PhDs, or physics degrees, or what have you. Um, Now, for analysts and all that, I would highly recommend calculus. I would also highly recommend the statistics course. Yeah, yeah. In general, I'm going to argue for calculus for everybody, just because calculus is so ingrained in how the world works. But yeah, the, so with a lot of the analyst work that you're going to be doing, you could probably get it with just a couple semesters of statistics. Um, there, a lot of what you need to know from statistics in order to do data analyst work is proving your assumptions, proving what you're saying is true, and not just some artifact of the data. And you'll get that within the hypothesis testing, probably. Yeah, yeah, you'll get that in probably in the first few semesters of the statistics course. One thing to be aware of too, with that is always, always be constantly reaching out and looking for resources. One of the most useful things that I've done with data science for my research purposes is watching YouTube videos about things I already know on channels like Numberphile or Computer File. Having new ways of thinking about things is very, 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 very powerful. Yeah. Any other? With I've done a lot. Yeah. 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 So my math, I got a math degree at Purdue, actually, a physics major, but yeah. So differential equations, complex analysis, real analysis, linear algebra. Oh, I love math. I love math. Math is very central to what I do. And if you don't love it, it yeah, it's going to be hard. Just because figuring out this stuff, there is a huge like push to just hammer something out and not worry about the results. And in order to operate quickly using advanced math is what's necessary for it. Yeah, yeah, proofs and all of that stuff. So what happens so what happens a lot in business is that for one of these projects you'll be under a time crunch and they just want to show something. Now, if you go through some of the traditional techniques of developing a solution for them, you're probably not going to find the answer quick enough, or it will be some alteration of it. Now, knowing math, you can operate much quicker because you know where to jump research-wise. You know where to apply that understanding to get what you need out of it, and that's it. I mean, it it these things are hard work and they require a lot of like research in that regard. And there is an impulse in data science in particular just to apply some magic neural network and say, oh, it will figure it out, and it would never have figured out that fraud one in particular. So yeah, it's yeah, it's fun stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Oh, hope we are. Well, yeah, thank you.